We'll call the meeting to order at 10 a.m. the Inspector Advisory Committee. Caller, don't see it on the agenda, but can you do a roll call?
Yes, I will. Just let this person in the room.
Thank you.
Okay. Sean?
Here.
Steve Reinhardt?
Here.
Bruce?
Here.
Brian? Mike?
Here.
Dave? Keisha? Lee?
Here.
And then I think we also have Chair Kessner and Commissioner Lerner online there.
All right. Thank you, everybody, for attending. Item number 2, discussion of possible action to excuse any committee member's absence. If there is any, we can hear that now.
We did get an email from Brian that he's is dealing with a funeral situation. So, but we've not heard from Dave.
Okay. So we go and make a motion to excuse Brian's absence for personal reasons. Motion made by Mike. Second on that. Second by Keisha. Any discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Say no. And that passes. Housekeeping.
That's me.
Oh, there's Dave right there.
Okay, let's let Dave in, and then.
Welcome, Dave.
Hey, Dave. Okay, same story, different meeting. We've got a virtual component, so if you are not speaking, we ask that you mute to, just in case it's like always happens to be the day that somebody's like blowing in the neighbor's yard or whatever. So do that, and if you are a member, we want cameras on, and if you are a member, you can feel free to speak up whenever, just unmute and speak up. You also have the hand raise function that looks like this, and if you want to use that, you can, and we'll try and remember, we always try and keep an eye on it. Don't forget to unraise your hand after you do that. And then in this room, everybody's pretty good. Just remember this is our microphone. You don't have to yell, but it's nice to speak in a voice that can be heard. And if you are signing in for CE credit, there is the sheet over there to sign it.
Sheet over there. Also, if you are wanting to discuss any particular agenda item or whatnot, please sign in there as well so that we have your information. I'm just letting you know, I'm going to join on this Teams one too, just because I'd like to be able to see if somebody's hand is up, just to make sure everybody gets heard. So make sure you're in stereo.
Yeah, just mute everything.
There it goes.
You gotta mute your computer.
Okay. Now, no double voice now, we're all right? Okay, good. I just like to be able to see people's hands, so just make sure it doesn't get missed. Okay. So here. Remarks from the chair. Didn't really have any remarks. We have commissioners meeting next month is in Houston, so we'll change of venue, I believe. So if anybody wants to attend that, I think that would be a good thing. If nothing else, I think it's good for not only the commissioners to get out there in different parts of the state, but any inspection committee members that want to get out, gives people an opportunity to communicate with us that may not do so otherwise. So I would welcome everybody to go if they have the opportunity. If they aren't already in the area, I am planning on being down there myself. So should be good. I think it's good that TREIC's kind of bouncing the meetings around. I think it's good for all of our stakeholders. Item number 5, ratification of the minutes from January 17th, 2023 meeting. I believe those have been sent out quite some time ago. It's been a while. Did anybody have any modifications to the minutes? Hearing none, those minutes will stand ratified. Number 6, general comments from visitors on, or written comments on non-agenda items. Do we have any visitors with any comments or anybody online with anything with non-agenda items? All right, hearing none, we'll move on.
We have a written one.
Oh, sorry. Oh, there was that one. I did read that one. I'll just read the comment just so that we, for those that haven't seen it. It's in regards to the standard inspection report form in regards to below, what if the inspection item is not or not present? Do we just check the not present box versus checking both the not present and not inspected box? Me personally, if I just put not present, I pretty much assume that it's not inspected.
Yeah.
So, there's obviously still a little bit of confusion about the multiple box checking things. I think we've tried to clarify that with some of the communications that have gone out, and I think that has cleared a lot of that up, but I think the basic gist of it is if however you're doing the report is perfectly fine. The only thing that will stipulate is that if you check more than one box, some type of explanation has to be given. You want to check all 4 boxes? Check all 4 boxes, if you feel that's relevant. But, all right.
Lee?
Yes.
And just a reminder to everybody, and since we're recording, just to be on the record, excuse me, there is that instruction form that we posted on the website as well that just provides some guidance. It's not mandatory or anything, but it provides some guidance to inspectors who may still have questions about stuff. So.
Fair enough. So you can go on TREIC's website, pull that down if you still have concerns or questions about that particular item, because that was one that did come up before. All right. Number 7, election of vice chair. So unfortunately, I should have done this in the remarks of the chair, but I forgot. Unfortunately, we lost one of our members. Not lost, but he had to resign for some personal reasons. Scott Regan, he was our vice chair. It was extremely unfortunate. His input has been extremely valuable up until this point. He will continue to do so. It's just going to take him a while to get back involved again. So with the committees and the inspector's best interest in mind, he went ahead and resigned. As a result, we do need a new vice chair. So I will open the election of vice chair for any nominations for anybody to nominate a vice chair. Mr. Morgan nominates himself. Any other nominations? I'm okay with that. Since there are no other nominations, he stands elected as vice chair.
There you go.
Yeah. You just found out I was going to be at the October meeting. You said, yeah, it's okay. I'll all right, I see how it is. Number 8, reports from subcommittees. Education subcommittee, please.
Okay, we met on March 23rd at 9:30. Mike, Bruce, Keisha. So we went through, just had some conversations about the apprentice inspector's license, and we just had a lot of conversations about that. We really wanted to bring back, and I don't know if we're just going to do this at this meeting or July, just get more direction from the full committee. And I think we decided, now that I'm looking at my notes, that if we were going to ask for a vote, we were going to wait till July meeting.
Well, you're talking about in terms of.
For the real estate inspector's license.
I don't think we need a vote on that. I think you could just get some direction from, Vanessa and I talked about it. You can get some direction from the full committee if that's what they want to do. Essentially, if the committee still wants to pursue getting rid of the real estate inspector license, that would change, that would sort of have an impact on the recommendation for apprentice certification as well, because that would open up a different avenue.
Sure.
So, but they wanted to make sure that was still what the committee wanted to do. So they just wanted some feedback on whether or not the subcommittee should be pursuing education recommendations for legislative changes based on that recommendation that the real estate inspector license go away.
Me personally, I think having both of those sub-licenses, I think they're so minimally used. I think it just creates more of a logistical issue by having it there. So I'm perfectly fine with getting rid of the real estate inspector license, as long as we allow, and I know that we already discussed this, that those that have an existing real estate inspector license will continue to keep their license. We're not getting and changing anything. We just won't issue new. We'll still renew the real estate inspector license, just won't issue new ones. So I just wanted to make sure that was clear, because that was some of the feedback that I got so far in discussions.
And on the other end of it, I've hired many apprentices, gotten them licensed, and I always get them licensed as real estate inspectors for a couple of reasons. One is a little quicker, a little easier, and I have a little more control over them. I pay for them to get licensed as professionals. They can theoretically quit you the next day in their competition. So I'm not totally opposed to getting rid of it, but just looking at it on the other side of the coin, there is some reason to keep it.
I think that's what our conversation for in the committee meeting is. We need to know what we're gonna do with this, because if we're gonna reformat how people become apprentice and how they keep their apprentice, we need to understand about what we're gonna do with real estate inspector's license. If we're gonna make it a step, a tiered system, or keep it a tiered system, but just change some of the requirements. Or, because I think some of the education concerns can be addressed through maintaining the real estate inspector's license that have come up, wanting to provide more training for the apprentice. And I do like mine. I hire guys, I got trained as apprentices and real estate inspectors, but then I stop. I'm not gonna pay for the next step up.
Right, but nothing prevents them from continuing their own education.
Oh, yeah,
Professional stuff.
yeah.
And you can make a business decision as far as how you manage your employees to keep more control over it.
Yeah.
That has nothing to do with the license.
No, it's not gonna affect one way or the other.
The last revision we did of the licensing rules made it almost the
Right.
same, because it is, right now, I think only about 3.5% of the
Yeah.
inspectors are real estate inspectors.
Yeah.
And most of those
Right.
are permanent. A lot of them are really old, they're assistants.
Yeah.
Family member stuff, they can keep them. But it would definitely clarify licensing, because right now,
Right,
we all still get calls.
yeah,
What do I really need to do? Because there's, the two tiers are confusing. Having an apprentice with no real experience requirements, and then a professional with one license, two
Yeah.
tracks, still apprenticing or going straight.
okay.
Clear up licensing a lot.
Yeah, we just wanted to bring it back.
Yeah.
So, we were going that direction in the past, we just wanted to
Oh,
clarify.
yeah, we wanted
Before we
to,
reinvent the wheel.
we wanted to
Yeah.
try to do that years ago, because it
Yeah.
does eliminate a lot of admin work, not having it.
I don't know if Bruce,
And most of the 3.5%, like I say, it's hard to find new real estate inspectors. They're less than 1% most years.
We're probably all working for
Probably.
I do have one. He's been a real estate inspector for 8 years. He has no intentions of going anywhere, but all of my professionals have no intentions of going anywhere.
My other big concern there is the perception from the consumer. How easy is it for the consumer to understand what the levels are, whether those people should be supervised? We just had a disciplinary action recently, where an apprentice has done one, which if they've done one, they've probably done more without direct supervision. And did he tell somebody, oh, I'm actually a real estate inspector, and when he's actually an apprentice? And I think from the consumer side, that could be clear as well.
It's like driving on a permit without somebody until you get caught.
Yep.
well, I think we got our clarification, so we'll start working on that. And then the other thing we discussed was the evaluation form for the practical. And I don't know if we,
Yeah, that's up
that's our
for,
agenda.
that's an agenda item, but yeah.
Okay. And do we remember what date we set? We're meeting?
It's one of the June.
20th June. All right, so June 20th, we're gonna meet again. We really want to get input from inspectors and anything like that. You can log on Teams and join our meeting, but we really want to get a lot of input on where we're going with our premise license and all that. That's it.
All right. Standards Practice Subcommittee.
We haven't done anything? Standards Practice Subcommittee hasn't had any meetings or anything yet.
Okay.
On the working groups, which is separate working on the legal and ethics.
Right. Yeah, well,
Kept us pretty busy.
She's a slave.
she is. We will definitely get input from her here, but.
No, listen.
All right, we'll move on to staff reports, executive division.
Yeah, I'm gonna give that very brief update. Chelsea's actually traveling today to speak at a someplace. But
On behalf of the
on
agency,
behalf of the agency.
We'll just go with that.
about real estate.
About real estate, so, listen to this and go, geez. Anyway, So I just want to talk briefly. So I think most of you know we've gone forward with implementing, or we're going forward with implementing a new database system, it's RAM system. So we're in the process of doing all the basic sort of building blocks of that right now, and moving towards having a more robust system, one that should be integrated easier with online access for license holders and a bunch of other things. This will hopefully be really good for us and for the public and for the license holders as well. So we'll continue to give updates on that as we progress moving forward. But it's the implementation's a ways off, but we are working on that. I should have probably done this first, introduce our new communication specialist, Sarah Pizarro. She came, when did you get hired, and
What was that?
how long have you been here?
April.
April,
So 2
okay.
weeks.
So she, as many of you know, Summer Mandel is off with a new child, and so we,
Congratulations.
yeah, and so, yeah. So Sierra's hired, well, initially hired, I mean, not hired because of that, but hired to help out because the communications role has grown, and
Yeah.
she's really taken to that role and jumped in with both feet and really helped out. But so while Summer is away, Sierra will be handling the majority of that. But I did want to introduce you guys to her. So that's really all I have.
Okay, and we're doing an update on the legislative stuff.
I should have mentioned that, yes. We're in the middle of session. I will be providing an update on the bill later on in the meeting. Thanks, Lee.
Enforcement.
Good morning, Tony Venturia, Staff Attorney and Liaison to the Inspector Committee. I have a very brief report. We have 7 disciplinary cases since the last committee meeting. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer any questions about these orders.
I've got a general question.
Sure.
Is it possible to do something graphical or whatever showing disciplinary actions versus how long an inspector has been licensed? I just think that.
I mean, I look up their license number.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, usually,
Well, you can tell by the number usually.
But
Yeah.
I'm just saying, looking at it, all the numbers are.
I got you.
I just
Well, it
think that
says-
could,
Doesn't it say on
Go.
there license?
Well, it says on
It's-
just
yeah, but I'm saying a cumulative
Like a report.
thing showing inspectors who've been licensed less than 2 years,
I
get
can talk-
70% of the complaints
I
or
can
whatever.
mention
Oh, I've done
some of
that.
that.
Yeah.
It's,
what?
it's not a report you get around. I did one for the broker responsibility working group a couple of years ago. It's taking the raw data, sorting it and doing other calculations of that. For the broker sales side, it was agents that were like 7 or 8 years into licensure. I can just say generally, it's people that are into the industry a little bit more, I think for inspectors as well. I can't say that for sure, but,
I'm just thinking it can show
it's
how good our
possible, it's
training.
possible to do. It's gonna take some time to do that. I mean, I would just, if there's a specific need for it, out of just curiosity, I'm just saying, I mean, for the broker sales thing, it took probably about 10 to 12 hours.
Okay, I was just wondering.
Might be a new, I mean, does the
I
new
mean-
system have an eye towards that? I love adding
Hard to
stuff
say.
it. Yeah.
The unicorns.
Yeah.
for enforcement,
It's not the only tracker for enforcement purposes, but if you'd like us to bring it back, we can. Just,
So I usually look at the license number when the stuff comes through.
Well, I do too, and it seems like all of them are very high numbers.
It just, yeah, and a lot of it is, but a lot of it depends on what is, like the form use is almost always an older, and it's just.
And I kind of did it like you're saying. I took what do they call the data file? The file, the license file, what do they call that, data file? And I download it probably twice a month. And then I sort it by the license numbers, and then I kind of keep all the enforcement actions. And I keep the names and numbers, and you can see where they are. And I think calculated like 92% of them are within the license number that's within, since 2015. The licensees within 2015 have like 92% of the complaints, yes. And like you said, the ones before that, the ones that are forwarded, virtually all of them are forms. Except for one.
Yeah. Question? David?
Yeah, Shannon Gatewood, on one of them, for these, using the wrong form, it said it was a mass-produced software. Do we know what software that was, and does TREIC or anyone else have a recourse on the back end of that to say, hey, software provider, you're not?
No, because the software provider isn't licensed. It's
I figured
it's
that
the
was the
inspector's
answer.
responsibility to ensure that they're using the proper form in whatever software that they're using.
Right, I figured that was the answer, but do we know what software it was?
Do you know what case it is?
I think it was 039.
Well, I don't know if it's
The very
appropriate to
first
say.
It just says,
The meeting.
it just said,
I don't know if it's appropriate to say that the company in open meeting.
Yeah.
Because it's not, it's probably not their fault. They may have an actual updated thing and,
sorry.
I mean,
Because a lot of times they'll have an update on their
They'll have-
website, say, hey, your form's changed, you need to go to our website and update
Yeah.
your software, and if they haven't done it, it's not really the
now,
company's
if
fault.
they say like, I checked with my provider and they didn't provide that, that's their affirmative defense that they can use. That's,
They can go buy one.
that's what they
Some of
can
them they
do.
don't, yeah,
The
they
thing
get
is,
that
though,
old, they have to pay for it.
Yeah, ultimately, it's their responsibility to have a curfew.
No, I understand
Yeah.
completely, understand, I'm just.
That's like blaming the brand of the car.
I mean, anyone's welcome to do open records requests for these files, and then information may be contained in them.
Yes, sir, appreciate you.
I have one question on the last one listed on there, that this one occurred on 322. So in the disciplinary, it talks about they didn't text GFCIs because he was worried about damage to the interior. And the explanation was, that y'all put in there was that you're only exempted from testing them on our fault. So if the inspector would have listed in his report that he didn't test them, would he be in compliance with that?
Okay, I'm sorry, can you repeat the case number again?
It's the
last one.
23.
232047, number 8.
22047. Read order 1500.
All
It's
right.
actually
It's
an
the next
exemption in
Yeah,
the SOP.
right, we can not
So you, if
test
it's,
anything as long as we're.
I think
proven.
it's
I just wanted to
realistically-
clarify that,
I think realistically, if it's an exemption in the SOP, then
You
there's
don't
a
have
question
to-
of
you don't
whether or
have to
not.
state it?
Yes,
Yeah.
you don't have to state it.
So I mean, that was the problem, is he didn't state the reason he didn't test them in the report.
Well, no, I think he said it was because the house was occupied was the issue.
Right.
And the fact the house is occupied is not a listed exemption in the SOPs to not test GFCIs.
But he
It
could
is for
have
AFCIs.
departed from it,
Yeah,
is what I'm asking.
he could have
That's what I'm
departed.
trying to get clarification on. He could have departed from it for any reason.
For any justifiable
Right.
reason, as long as his client agreed
Right.
to it. I mean, that's the other part, the client's got to agree to it. And the issue came up when all this came about, that GFCIs versus ARCLs, you don't normally have a TV or a computer or whatnot plugged into a GFCI. You do typically on an ARCL. So you start resetting people's
Well,
alarm clocks,
I mean,
TVs.
If you look at it, he generally did it, the fact is because it was occupied.
Yeah.
Right.
And you're not allowed to unless you get specific, like, written permission to
Follow
depart
the
from
departure.
it.
Follow
So
the
the
departure.
departure
Okay.
'Cause he
That's just what I want to
just
clarify.
generally, it seemed like he blankly didn't test at all
Okay,
if there was someone in the house.
Fact is, if you're putting in there that
yeah.
I didn't test GFCIs because the house is occupied, to me, that's a routine departure. And if you have a routine
Right.
departure,
Right.
you have to disclose that with the first client contact.
Okay, I just want to clarify on that.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Alright, anything else, any other questions for enforcement? Alright. Education and Examinations Division.
No, it's my notes. Hi. I just realized that almost all my notes have been lost on the agenda items I am to report on today.
Okay.
Jennifer Wheeler, Director of Education. I will address the education reports first. The February fiscal year to date education application processing totals are included in your materials. You can follow along if you like, but I'll cover the highlights. In the middle of the second section on the first page, you will note that we approved 5 new inspector qualifying courses this month. These are courses for one of our newer inspector education providers. And in the last 2 years, our total number of qualifying education providers has increased from 7 to 10. So I think that's noteworthy and great news for potential inspector applicants, increasing options for them. The second page of the report indicates that inspector CE courses have remained steady over the months. And to date, fiscal year to date, we have approved 84 inspector CE courses. The 3 remaining reports reflect comparisons of overall applications received and approved, broken down into a 13-month comparison, a 5-year look-back comparison to include this fiscal year through February, and a 5-year look-back comparison of all applications combined approved in each year. And as I reported to the Education Subcommittee last month, our overall volume of applications remains high. The inspectors have not been so significantly impacted, so their processing times have not been as impacted, but we are experiencing some backlog in processing of applications overall. But I think, inspectors alone are not necessarily that impacted. I just wanted to give you that information. And that is all I have for my education report.
So there's obviously a number of applications, number that have been approved. Some of those are gonna be, you just haven't worked through the process yet. Some of those have been declined. Can you just shed some light on what are some of the most common reasons why education providers apply for a course to be approved that it would get denied?
We don't deny all that much.
Okay.
Rather, we try to work with the education provider and say, if your content really isn't aligned with the requirements for an inspector license, the SOPs, or business, then we try to give them some feedback and say, here's where you're a little off base, here's where you could make some adjustments. And then we give them the opportunity to resubmit. Like without needing to deny the application, but just saying, hey, make some revisions to your outline. And really, those are mostly just newer providers that are learning.
I know a few years ago, it felt like a kind of free-for-all, because I remember going to a real estate continuing education class that was on dining etiquette.
Yeah,
I really had no idea what that had to do with real estate, but it was approved, and I think we've shored up a lot of that since then, but I just wanted to see if there was anything still possibly getting denied or kicked out, so.
Oh.
Okay.
Yeah.
Fair enough. Oh, yeah.
Did you use the right form?
I did not. Right, anything else, Jennifer?
Not for the education report.
Licensing.
Yeah, good morning. Denise Sample, Director of Licensing. So page 13 of the materials starts off the licensing reports, and that bottom left-hand side shows year-to-date comparison of initial inspector applications, which also includes reinstatements. Those are lumped together. And so we're still seeing that decline from when we had 2 years ago, that peak from everyone getting in ahead of the requirements. So you see broken down by professional and real estate and apprentice inspector. The next page shows the renewal activity. Inspector information is on the right-hand side. The professional inspector renewal rate is generally hovering around that percentage. I did look back several years prior to the real estate inspector and apprentice inspector, and because the licenses renew on a 2-year cycle, that tends to be kind of where those numbers hover, sometimes down to 30. For apprentices, it's kind of the lowest it's been in a little bit, but real estate inspectors generally hover around 65 to 75. So nothing alarming there, but something we continue to monitor. The license holder counts are the next report, and so you'll see kind of towards the middle of that table, inspectors and active inspectors are broken out. So as of the end of February, we have 4,975 total licensed inspectors, and 4,287 of those were active.
It's crazy we have that many.
The next page has the graphical presentations. You can see in yellow are the inspectors. And then the last page of my report shows the average number of calendar days to process an application. And the inspector applications are broken out by type and they're in the center of that report. We have a goal set by the commission of 14 calendar days to turn those around. And so you'll see, we ended February with under 7 days for a professional inspector application and right around 5 days for an apprentice. We didn't have any real estate apprentice applications that their review was complete during that reporting month. That's why you'll see an NA listed there. And then below, just to kind of have as a little bit of a benchmark, they don't relate one-to-one, but to give you an idea of how many applications came in that particular month.
Okay.
That concludes my report. Do you have any questions?
Any questions?
I do.
Go ahead.
On this, the graph on the renewal activity shows 75% renewal. Does that mean 25% of inspectors are not renewed?
Did not renew timely. So
Okay.
the way we're able to extract this information from our system is to look at, and so as a reminder, we open renewal applications 90 days before a license expires, and they have up to 6 months to renew a license. So at any given time, we have 9 months worth of licenses that have, the option to renew. So this report is looking at from September through February, licenses who are eligible to renew, and of those, how many renewed timely.
Okay, so it's not saying we're losing 25%?
No, it's,
Okay.
I've sat and wrinkled my brain, trying to talk with the IT team to figure out how to hone in on these numbers, and this is the way we've been reporting on these kind of the most consistently, and it's
There's some attrition
I mean, there's.
going on.
In the database, there's
Yeah.
over 2,000 expired licenses.
So what
They're still listed.
what we're looking at is kind of the rate that's really, if it's holding steady, then that's.
And it's still up from the last renewal period.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, it's slightly, but the people are renewing more than they did the last time the renewal period was.
Well, and, as a reminder, we also allowed for inspector providers to transmit the continuing education information electronically, and that streamlined the renewal process significantly. Before, a lot of the back and forth was, you're missing all but one certificate, and please attach that one. And so there, just a lot of back and forth with getting email attachments from the inspector, as opposed to having a provider just update it all at once for an entire class.
And the provider now being able to go online
Yeah.
and put in the
Right.
C information, that's been a huge help for providers as well. It makes life so much easier.
Right.
So,
Tom Langley, Attorney Home Inspection. So that's on line with the question that I had. How long were you finding that it was taking these providers to get the accredited classes that people have taken, like apprentice inspectors and so on, into TREIC? Because I've had some experiences here recently where I've been an apprentice inspector who their stuff hasn't been entered yet. And so is that the school or is it TREIC?
It's the school.
it's the.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Jen Wheeler speaks
I
to
can
that.
take that question. All of our education providers have, per rule, 10 days to post credit.
I will.
Right, and we recently did a survey, sent a survey out, and of those that responded, most of the respondents said that they typically were able to post within 3 to 5 days.
Yeah.
If an education provider is not posting within the 10-day time period required by rule, then we can file a staff-initiated complaint, and then it goes to the enforcement division. So if an education provider is not doing that, then they are not complying with the rule.
Okay.
Does that help?
Yeah, that helps.
And the providers get renewal or get reviewed during their renewal process, and that
Yes.
stuff can be evaluated. So if there's consistent complaints that they're not getting their stuff in, and truthfully, with the online input there is no reason why 10 days shouldn't be accomplished. So, okay. Any other questions for licensing data? All right, Number 10, discussion of possible action regarding an evaluation form for the Texas Practicum. Do you want that one too, Denise or Jennifer?
Am I looking at
That's the
the,
wrong agenda.
I think that's
Oh, do I
11.
have the wrong agenda?
Should be, we had a revised agenda that went out.
Yeah.
It's on the table over there.
Yeah,
Um,
number 10. Just the SOP.
Discussion possible action regarding course materials for the inspector legal ethics and SOP review course. Yep. That works. Alright. So yeah, I will let Ms. Jennifer
I can
Ruby.
take that, Sean, unless you wanted to intro thing.
No, on the education? No.
Okay.
I came from the writing committee, I believe.
Yeah, so I'll kind of give you all an overview. The contents for the 2023-2024 Inspector Legal Ethics SOP course were sent to you all under separate cover, not as part of meeting materials, and that's intentional. This is the second version of the course that TREIC staff, along with the subject matter experts, several of whom are here in this room, that have written. Sorry, I lost my train of thought for a minute. So if we recall previously, we had the course content outline that the committee recommended, and then the education providers would develop the course. 2 years ago, the writing group or the inspector committee wrote this course as an update, and this is what you're looking at. This is the second round. The previous course has been updated. So I would like to just acknowledge and thank Lee, Stephen, Mike, Tom for your efforts in this endeavor. Even though we didn't have to start from scratch this year, still developing the content and the materials is a heavy lift. And then also I would like to acknowledge Jennifer Ruby, our curriculum developer, with whom we could not have accomplished what this group has done. The materials you received are the basic content of the revised course. We're still editing for clarity and grammar and things of non-substance. We'll probably be adding or replacing a couple of the photos, maybe adding some more graphics, and then of course formalizing it and making it all polished into the book that will go before admission. So at this time, we would like to welcome your feedback on the overall content of the course. The writing group is going to meet again after this meeting. We'll have a short break, maybe to get some food. But we're going to meet after this meeting and to discuss the recommendations that the full committee has and work on incorporating those into the manual before sent to the full commission. So, so this is opening it up for discussion, for any recommendations or your feedback on what you reviewed. And then Ruby, is there anything that you would like to add?
No, I think Jennifer, you pretty much covered it. We wanted to bring this draft of the new 8-hour course to you guys for your review and for any comments or recommendations you might have in order to be able to incorporate those before and get your approval on the manual before it comes before the full commission in May.
Yep.
So we welcome any recommendations or comments you have, and as Jen mentioned, the changes that we are looking at making from this draft are mostly the non-substantive working on the wording and some of the photos and some of the things like that, so.
So the big thing here is this is not the pretty version. This is everybody's worked through and put a whole lot together version. We aren't looking at typos or any of that grammatical stuff. That'll all be addressed and checked. But if there's content issues that we have any questions with, anything in there that we might want to block out or throw or in or out, that's really what we want to cover here. The version that is current now was the first time we had done that. And there's a lot thrown in there, and that was a huge endeavor. But going through this, it's like taking the first version, you go back and why did we do that type of thing, and recycling it. So we took feedback from providers and people that had taken the course over the last couple of years and tried to incorporate a lot of that in fixing this as well. So
That's pretty.
Thank you. Yeah, I was just gonna say, it's a step up from.
Absolutely. No, it is-
Absolutely.
I
Yeah.
didn't want any conversation, well, can we put this here? I was like, I don't wanna get in the weeds on any of that stuff. This is really to look at content and
Yeah.
specific
We
information.
don't
So-
need to know if you'd like us to align something, you know,
Right,
like
right.
Yeah.
placing on the page.
I just like to
That's
clarify that, cause sometimes we,
Yeah.
some OCD brains,
Yeah.
myself included,
Yes,
we'll
yes.
start doing that, so.
Well, and we do anticipate changes, right, because you guys are meeting again.
Yeah.
But really just getting the eyes on it of this group to be like, look good, it's the same.
It looks
you
good.
know.
Well, it's at
Yeah.
149 pages. Yeah. Some eyes that weren't involved in putting it together are good, because after a while,
Yeah.
when you're in it all the time, it kind of looks the same, and you don't notice something.
Yep. And honestly, the only thing that I wanted to possibly take out is, and we've had a lot of conversations about, is the basic tool list. And that's on it's an agenda item for later for discussion, and it can go back in, but that's the only thing, and we'll talk about that in the agenda item itself. But that was the only thing for me that I feel kind of needs to be pulled out of that. But we'll go into that more detail.
And I
But,
don't know that you need action.
right, that's why I'm not getting into it hot and heavy right now, so.
Yeah, that's the only thing I saw a couple times where I was reading stuff and I was like, what tool would the inspector use?
Right,
Like
it's a big
humidity-
conversation.
Like humidity, I know you can look at the weather, or you can
Yep.
feel the humidity outside, I was reading the AC section. But, you know, there was that one comment that said, we might note in our report that the temperature differential wasn't able to be achieved because humidity was high. And
Well, it's in the SOP that there are exceptions.
Yeah, no, you're right.
Conditions,
You're right.
but you
You're
gotta
right.
know what you're talking about there.
Right, yeah.
And so we have to address.
Yeah, and the only thing I thought of just is that basically dictating to the inspectors that you have to carry some type of tool with this to measure the humidity, which I know the SOPs don't say that.
I don't
If you don't
think,
understand the environmental conditions, you probably won't use
Right.
it.
Yeah. it's a conversation worth having, but for our purposes, it's an agenda item down here that we'll get a little more into the weeds, but I don't want to spend a whole lot of time on that. But is there anybody else has any other things within this course that they feel add, remove, modify, anything of the such? Any other feedback you want to give to education in regards to
I think y'all did a good job. I mean, it's a lot of content. I've covered a lot of stuff. That needs to be addressed for years, so I think it's, I know we already have one document, but this is, I think it'll be a lot.
And once we get it
More
out,
information.
and you see things that
Right.
got by or things that have changed,
And I think it does a
We
good
kinda
job
keep a
addressing
running
like
list.
temperature differentials, different foundation, retaining walls, the graphs and stuff in there.
some of them are just hard to.
Yeah.
And this is an update, not a base.
Right, it's not a rewrite, even though
Well,
we've
it's
kind of
not-
rewritten.
No, I mean, we didn't look at it as, this is a tool used for,
Right.
you know, licensing when they first get their license.
Right.
This is for licensed people.
But this is infinitely better than where we were at with just giving an outline to a provider and saying, here you go.
Yeah, it looks
This
good.
should be a lot more consistent across the board, and I think statewide. And I will say, I apologize if you're a stakeholder or a member of the public and going, I don't know what y'all are talking about, I really wanna see this. We can't give that information out yet, which is hard. We're asking you for feedback and you can't get feedback on it because it's really just for the committee members, so. It is not intentional for us to hold that back, it's just we can't give that information out yet, so. Anybody have any other feedback on that? No? Jennifer, I tell you, it's, with everything y'all have done, that's fantastic, that's a huge undertaking, huge undertaking.
And if you like how it's looking, the direction of it, then that was my, and I think Jennifer's, our intent to bring it to the committee today.
And I think that's all we need, right, just to
Yeah,
make it available to the.
right, to provide your input and feedback. I mean, this isn't the final version, and it seems like the input is, this is looking good. We've got members of the committee on the writing group. You know, the recommendation at the commission meeting, you know, we'll note that it went through here. The writing group ultimately just making that recommendation to move forward.
So do we need a motion to propose to the full commission? I wouldn't think we would
No.
for this, but.
I don't think you do. You're
Okay.
welcome to.
No, I didn't think we would, I just want to make sure.
Yeah, I think it's just important that you all have eyes on it and the direction it's taking. But it's not final.
Yeah.
So,
Okay. It's just for time's sake purposes or timeline purposes, this all has to, it gotta be proposed in May and then approved at the next one so that it can go live September 1st, because that's when the current course expires and the new course, or expires August 30th, but the new one.
so it'll be
It'll
approved
be
at the
approved
May,
in
right?
May.
Oh, will be approved,
Yeah.
okay.
That gives a runway for the providers to start.
Right.
It doesn't go through the proposal and then the open for public comment process.
Okay, because it's a course.
Right.
Gotcha, okay. Cool. Yeah, that'll be done. All right. Now, discussion and possible action regarding an evaluation form for the Texas Practicum.
Okay. That's me again, and then you'll be done with me. So, Amber's got that, the PDF form up on the screen, it's in your materials. In January, the Education Subcommittee expressed interest in specific feedback regarding the experience students have taking the Texas Practicum. In response, staff took the subcommittee's recommendation and feedback and presented the group with a Texas Practicum evaluation form, similar to the course and instructor evaluation form used by students of qualifying in CE courses. The subcommittee reviewed the form at the March meeting and made some additional recommendations, which have been incorporated into the document that you see here. Students can complete these evaluations in two ways. They can fill out a paper form and provide it to their education provider, who is required to maintain evaluation forms for a period of 4 years. Alternatively, a student may complete the evaluation form via the TREIC website, where information will be stored and retrieved as necessary. As part of the Education Administrative Audit Program, education providers are required to provide sampling of evaluations for review by our compliance specialist, and so that's when we can pull those unless otherwise an issue comes up and we need to look into that and research more. I wanted to, Amber, can I send you this link real quick to the TREIC test website?
Mhm.
I want you all to be able to see what the online, this is not live, but this is what it looks like, will look like. Just sent that to you, Amber. For students who would like to fill it out online.
While she's getting that and looking through this form, one of the concerns that we've had over the years is the consistency of the, that course. And are you getting, is it actually teaching you, or are you doing what you're supposed to be doing? And I think this is a great way for the student to actually hold the provider and the teacher accountable if they're not doing it. It also, by asking these questions, it tells the student, this is what TREIC's expectations are with that course and what you should be getting out of it. So if the answer is no, that at least tells that student to go back and go, why did I not do that? So.
And I think that was part of the original discussion too, which is valid.
Absolutely.
So anyway, this is what it would look like on the TREIC website.
Perfect.
Yeah. We were talking last time about what happens with these forms, like if there is a bad evaluation, does anybody even know there's a bad evaluation? Why couldn't it all be online, and if there's a certain box checked, there's.
Sends a trigger?
An alert is triggered, yeah.
So I think we need to be careful in one sense that we are, one, in terms of enforcement actions, we're complaint driven. Two, when filling out these evaluations, they're subjective to the student, and the students, perhaps the student had a bad day, perhaps the student just doesn't like the instructor. And so I think it would be a little bit of shaky ground for us to go and say, every time there's a negative evaluation, it triggers some kind of investigation. It would also be like an overwhelming task.
I can understand that.
Could be weaponized.
But for those forms, if they just get filed away and nobody ever looks at them, they don't.
Well, but we do look at them through the audit program. So,
Audit
you know,
form.
one, we would be, you know, complaint driven, if there's a complaint against an education provider, we can go look at those evaluations perhaps. But also regularly through the administrative audit of the qualifying education providers and continuing education providers, we do pull evaluations.
To be part of their renewal
It's-
process, right? For their
it's-
provider license?
Yes,
That's-
Is it on every provider or?
yes,
I don't think
all
I've ever had-
all qualifying providers.
Oh,
We haven't shifted the program yet into continuing
okay, because
education,
I
but
was gonna
that's
say, I've never been on.
another phase.
Give it time. You're on the list.
I have all my, I have them.
Again, Shannon Gatewood, is qualifying education provider required to provide the ride-alongs? Or can they just say, I'm offering you the classroom, go find your own ride-along?
Oh, yeah, no,
And who's
we do
holding on
not
to the evaluation
require
forms at
qualifying
that point?
education providers to provide all
Right.
courses and the practicum.
So who's holding on to these paper forms as me as a freelance ride-along provider? And I give them that form and then I file it away, you go to do an audit, where's the documentation that says, oh yeah, you know,
But if you get audited, you're supposed to be supplying X number.
I don't think an audit of the practical.
Well, I think, as in most cases, I would suggest that we try to advocate people to use the online system as opposed to the paper form.
Yeah.
But in his
I'm just thinking of the loophole.
situation,
Yeah,
we
no,
don't
but-
have access to do that.
But I think one thing she was saying is TREIC is generally complaint driven, you know, consumer complaint. So if this student feels like they got a bad product, they should be bringing these complaints to TREIC. I think the forms, a lot of times, are more feedback from instructors. And as a provider, say, I need to do a better job at this or whatever.
So those of us that do ride-alongs, like him, that provide it for the training students independently, I don't have a way to upload, I give it to the student and he turns it in, like they do for licensing. All the programs, right?
So he turns it into you?
No, I fill it out, give it to the student. They turn it into TREIC.
Well, are you talking about the credit requests?
No, the
ride-along?
ride-along, the 40-hour.
Right, with the credit request for the 40-hour
Yes,
ride.
yes.
Yes, that,
I can't,
this does not interfere with that process.
so that's still a paper mode that goes to the student turns it into.
To Denise's
So
team.
licensing with their application.
Right, yeah.
Another question?
Yeah, so just a thought.
Stand up, name,
Tom
please.
Langley, I'm getting.
He's old.
I'm old, my girl's 4. Just a thought, why could that not be incorporated on the credit form? For the ones that have to be sent in to TREIC for the independent providers, the ride-along instructors?
Well,
Could that not be
Well, we-
incorporated?
I think
in that
again,
form
you
as
you
well?
run into a situation if you went through and had that and that student had a bad day or whatnot, and it's just, I think it's a real gray area if you start requiring that and pushing that. You can get somebody that didn't like their provider, even though they may have given a really great course, they just may not have liked their personality or whatnot, and they're gonna say no on a couple of those things to maybe draw a couple red flags on that individual instructor. It's just,
I mean, there are some that I kind of tell them they ought to pursue other career opportunities.
yeah. Honestly, I think this form is more for the student
Yeah.
than anything
It's
else.
feedback
Just so
from
that
them.
the student knows what the expectation is. And it's something that's got TREIC's name on it, here's what the expectation is from the course. Did this meet the expectations? And if they didn't, at least that starts that conversation between the student and the instructor.
Because a lot of them have no idea what the job entails until they go to school.
Absolutely. And unfortunately, sometimes they don't know even after they go to school. So hopefully
So-
this can close that gap a little bit.
Yeah, I think a couple of things, thank you for pointing this out to me, is the eval form is for feedback and not for evidence necessarily of a violation.
Right.
Having the form available there are some gaps that will be missed. We don't regulate instructors anymore. That was taken away, the sunset recommendation. But the evaluation form does close the loop on some gaps, and I think from what I understood from the original request, that there is some value here. It will not cover every scenario. But it will allow us to gather some information and hold those education providers accountable to some degree when we go through our audit program. We look at how are they qualifying their instructors, which is one of the things that the audit program does. So I just wanted to offer you that.
Well, and it might be something where, you get this form in place and then we start looking. I mean, I think you raise a great point, Shannon, right? So it's something that, like Jen said, so we're not getting it all, but it's an ongoing discussion and you're getting a pretty big chunk as you move forward,
I
so.
think it could help with the trend, I mean.
Yeah, no, I think,
Keep getting, but if those negative feedback forms keep getting pushed in the, if you watch The Office, the New York file, and nobody ever knows about it, and TREIC comes and says, hey, we wanna do an audit on best inspection school. Well, they're not holding the forms, so you don't have those. But who are you using for your providers? And I don't know, whoever we don't worry about the ride-along instructors. And then you're going back in your database, looking up, okay, who did they submit with their application, trying to track that down, and now that guy's, website is dead. I know there's not a right answer,
no, I think that's the conversation, right?
Well, and I think there are some things we can use, in particular, the online tool to look at, which is we have a back-end process that collects the data, and we can look at that to identify trends, like, let's say, everybody who filled out the online or the online evaluation is saying that they weren't required to complete 5 full inspections. Okay, that's informative, and that's something that we can discuss.
Or I wrote the same report 5 times and he called it.
Right, so,
Paid him extra money and he just did that.
yeah.
Now, does the practicum instructor have access to the online comments that were made to this form, to the results of this form?
That would not.
From other online.
No, so if
They
I,
can request it.
yeah, so if I'm an instructor, to utilize looking at it from a completely different side, from the instructor side, am I gonna give an online form, am I gonna give a paper form? I'm probably gonna give a paper, not because I'm trying to hide something, it's because I actually want the feedback from that person. And I can use that in my marketing materials to help promote my business to get more potential ride-alongs. So why, as an instructor, would I do online if I have no access to it, and I have no way of knowing?
Well, you wouldn't have, there's not an automatic component of access. So when a student goes in and would do an online evaluation, it wouldn't immediately notify you. However, you could still request the information and we can provide it to you because it is stored.
Could we not trigger that so that if an online evaluation is filled out, personally, I'd rather see the paperwork go away and just use the online. And when somebody fills it out, you put the license number of the person, of your instructor, and it immediately sends an email, here's the results. We just had an online form.
We can look into it.
To me, that would kind of solve a couple of different issues.
Mhm.
If you just got rid of the paper side, just use the online side, because you're manually entering the information, and put the instructor's license number there. It triggers something in the database. As soon as that form's filled out, boop, sends him an email, says, you just had a new evaluation. Here's the information.
I think that sounds pretty complex based on the knowledge that I have of our current database and the online, and the connection to
Okay.
our Versa Online, the
But
website.
we're redoing the database
But-
right now. too,
Well,
and
that's
would that
what I was
be-
gonna say. One, it might not be something that we can allocate a lot of resources to right now, just because of where we are with database replacement. It's certainly something we can look at with the new system, but also in the meantime, we can look into what it would take.
I would see it as a great opportunity, not just from this, but for all evaluation forms. We wouldn't have to just do it for inspectors, obviously the numbers are slightly skewed, but if we had that option, to you can be a lot more ecologically sound, not do a paper, whatnot. If it's all online, it triggers that school, that provider or that instructor, here's the feedback, evaluation.
He let me know. So this is something that, when we had the education meeting, we went round and round on this form for a while, really trying to look at what problem are we trying to solve? And what does this look like in practice? And it sounds like there's still things that are kind of popping up, like we're not totally clear on this form and what it's going to do and where it's going to go. So is it something that, based on this conversation, kicks back to education to walk through that some more? Is it something that you want to move forward with and then see how it, it functionally works as is to do that online thing, so you could do that. But I think, just given Sean that conversation, it was a pretty big conversation, like what are we doing, like what's the intent, what is this gonna look like? Have we really fleshed that out? Because I mean, these are points that we haven't discussed before, right?
The basic requirement is we're documenting the 40 hours required for licensing first, right?
I think what this accomplishes is allowing the same opportunity a student of the Texas practicum has that a student of any qualifying or CE course has to offer feedback. Does that
Yeah,
make
I
sense?
think what we keep talking about is wanting to use these to police people, and the other forms don't have a way of policing people either. Like,
Right.
there's all kinds of evaluation forms that get filled out for qualifying, CE classes, stuff like that, that don't have a mechanism to police, don't set off alarms if someone checks, this instructor's horrible.
Right.
It just goes in a file. There's a whole different issue to address if we want to use them to police people, but I think the form addresses what the initial concern was we want the students to be able to be aware that certain things should have happened during this practice and be able to fill this form out. And if they feel, when they're going through it, they're like, this guy didn't do any of this stuff, then it can maybe trigger them to call TREIC.
Right. So
Or generate a complaint,
No,
versus-
exactly. So what I hear, and what I understood this to be, like I said, is just an opportunity to provide the same kind of feedback that is, that the student has the opportunity to. And so, but then as another layer of this conversation, I'm hearing that there is some interest in expanding what that is across the board. And that to me is a little bit different conversation. That's something we can take back
Completely
and say,
understand that.
okay, well, what other options do we have through technology to maybe even kick this up a couple of notches? But I think for the agenda today, it's yay or nay.
No, I like the form. I think it accomplishes what we want to accomplish. I don't want it to be a policing thing in any way, shape, or form either. But I think it's a good opportunity for the instructor to actually get that and have digital information kind of help go paperless and stuff like that too. Yeah. Did you have something, Tony?
No, I was just, from, my thought is that sometimes when you provide an opportunity to give some feedback, that in itself is sort of a deterrent.
Yeah.
Because then the instructor is aware, like, oh, they're gonna get some feedback,
Right.
I better do a good job.
Yeah.
So I think that kind of addresses a little bit that concern.
So this form would be one that the instructor would give, correct?
The instructor would either provide the form or provide the link to the website. And that is a requirement by rule. Well,
Go ahead.
it's a requirement for courses. I don't think the rule actually speaks specifically to the requirement for the practicum. But the idea would be that the instructor either gives the PDF, a paper copy to the student or provides them the TREIC website.
So just spitballing, not wanting to get in a whole different conversation, but what if when the students submitted this 40-hour practicum, TREIC sent them this form? Just as soon as they send in 40 hours for evaluation, you've gone through that 40 hours, TREIC sends out that form. Here's for your instructor, here's the online link to where you can do it. You can give it to your instructor or you can do it online.
Separate from the provider doing it at the time of class?
We're assuming the provider's actually gonna give them the form.
Yeah, no, I'm just asking,
Yeah.
I'm asking like in addition to,
Just
Yeah.
just thought.
Oh, no.
no, I think
I didn't mean to say.
that's what I mean. So I think when we look at the initial problem we're trying to solve, right, which was creating the form, this is where we had a real long conversation.
Yeah.
It's creating a form that's consistent with what we're doing with other areas, and we're getting that feedback, we're seeing what's happening with the practicum, right?
Yeah.
And then there's bigger conversations happening about, okay, well, what does that look like generally with providers, and what could we do in that? And I think that seems like that's the ongoing part.
And I think there's definitely an accountability component like Tony was talking about as well. My concern is I'm looking at it from the side of,
Yeah.
I'm an instructor that I know I'm doing a horrible job. I'm not giving you that form. So if TREIC, if they submit the 40-hour practicum to you, if that triggers, hey, here's your evaluation for that practicum, then we know that student is being told what those expectations were of that 40-hour practicum.
Are we doing that
Whether
with
they,
every
whether they
course?
do the evaluation or not, whether they do it online or they do send it, give it to their instructor, but at least we know, here's a checklist, basically, your evaluation, you can give it right to your instructor if you want, but we know that you've gotten this form to know that.
For Chuck to do that?
Well, I think you'd have to, that's a bigger idea that, is sort of happening in the moment, but I think you'd probably wanna discuss, are we doing that for every course? Is there a reason that we're going out and trying to get that, okay, in the instance that there's a bad actor essentially out there, TREIC's going out and sort of more prompting the complaint. I'm just like fleshing this out as you're saying this, so I think that's the bigger.
This course to me is that last line of defense before they go out by themselves in somebody's
Yeah.
home.
So you think it rises to a little bit of a
I
different
think
level?
this is that threshold, where this is that last line where you have to take all the education that you've got, you're doing the practicum basically to incorporate everything that you've got. And that practicum is basically proving, I can do this on my own, ready to go. So that's, to me, that course signifies, I'm about to be a professional and going into somebody's house by myself.
And the licensing exam.
It is, of course.
So maybe that, yeah, go ahead.
Well, and I think I just answered my own question, I was just saying, can we not include a link to the evaluation on the spot where they download the credit request form?
Yeah.
Or make
There
that
you
a
go.
2-page PDF and include the eval form as the last page of the credit request form.
That would work too.
Because, all those questions are
Then
valid
it doesn't
about
make you have to
changing the
send out another
license
email, but
application
at least it's
process.
provided.
Yeah.
Right, but if we do it, they're going to click to download the credit request form that, the professional inspector's filling out for them to turn in, the second page could be the eval.
And this will be, this is, we plan on posting it, it will have a landing page on the website. It'll be incorporated into different areas as well. We just hadn't brought it forward to you yet, so we didn't go live with it.
Yeah.
This is just.
But I think if we could do that, that would solve, I think that would solve that issue. I think that's great. And logistically, it doesn't create a whole huge problem as well.
You don't have to change any rules.
Just for the conversation.
Well, right, so maybe, since we're just kind of throwing ideas out there, which I love, that's what this is for, right? So maybe what we do, I think staff has heard some ideas about, hey, well, could TREIC do this, could TREIC do that? Maybe what we do is we take stock of all these ideas, kick it back to education, and then at the next meeting, talk about what that looks like. Because I think there's been some good ideas thrown out.
I want to make sure from not only the instructor's perspective, but the student's perspective, that information is there, because I think this practicum, there's so many, myself included, there are so many license holders that went through all their education, they got out on their own, and like, I have no idea what I'm doing. And that's a scary thing for consumers, and we're here to protect consumers and try to find the best way possible to make sure that that person that goes through this education is ready to go as much as humanly possible. So, yes, John.
I just have a clarifying question that will help with that conversation. How many people in this room do the practicum course, teach the practicum course? Are you guys assigned to a specific provider?
I have my own provider.
But Steve, you're not?
I
The
have
two of you are?
an hour.
Okay.
They
Thanks.
usually come to me after they finish the course and
And so there's not like, oh, I took it with XYZ provider, you're not paid by that provider to do it, you're an independent
Yes,
person doing that.
correct.
I'm not saying you
They-
have to be, I'm just saying, I just wanted to.
They're using a provider that does not
Provide the practical.
So they finish all the academics and everything, sometimes even take
Okay.
a test. And then they start the phone book method of trying to find somebody to give them the practical.
Perfect,
And
thank you.
there'll be a plethora of names, and I'll be like number 14 that even considered saying yes.
Okay,
Because they're out, their name's on there, but they all say no.
all right, I got you, thanks, that helps.
I apologize in advance for my OCD-ness here. There's a little inconsistency in the questions. Questions 2 and 3 say, were you actively involved? Were you required? Question 7 says, I feel. So you've got second and first person. I would just make that a little more consistent.
So you're saying after the practicum, do you feel confident in it?
I mean, just for
Okay,
consistency.
just grammatical
purposes.
change.
On which,
Well,
Number 7.
oh, okay.
He says I.
Yeah,
after
no,
saying
that's
you on the
great.
others.
Okay,
Yep.
we'll make that change, thank you.
And on the top, it's saying submit this form to education. Are we wanting it to be submitted to education, or are we wanting it to be submitted to the provider?
I'm
I'm
I see
good.
what you're saying, yeah,
That's part of the same conversation of what we're having now. We're
yeah.
Right.
back. So that's why I'm kind of curious, where is this going?
I think that's something that needs to be fleshed out a little bit more. Because
That's a good point.
there's some questions that have been raised during this conversation that I think.
I like the form. I absolutely like the idea of the form. I just want to make sure if we're rolling it out, we're doing it in such a way that it truly benefits the student, which is the goal, but it also can really benefit the providers or the instructor as well. I don't want it to be a policing action in any way, shape, or form. It's not the intent, and I don't think that's anybody's intent here, but.
So I think the idea in having this sent to education was that if the person's not going online and they're just submitting a PDF form and they're submitting it as an attachment with something, then we can take that information and plug it in to the online system so that then, we have kind of a fuller response bank there. But it's a good point, and I feel like something that we could add to this would be, to make sure, some language that says, make sure that you get a copy of this to your education provider or instructor. So that's another adjustment that we could make to the form.
So the SOP committee meeting, we need to look at
Education.
education. I was on SOP.
That's okay.
So we need to look at a couple things, grammatical stuff that he brought up, how the report, the form is getting sent out. So we'll take all this up.
Okay.
And then bring it back to the next meeting.
And I like the idea of the link next to the request form. I think that's great. It prevents TREIC from having to send a whole other email. It's quick and easy. So, okay. Very good.
So we're not going to, I'm making this clarification for purposes of the meeting. We're not moving forward with this form yet.
Right, we're sending it back.
So we'll
Sending
bring
it
the
back.
form back to the education subcommittee at the June meeting.
We'll have this as a future agenda item for July.
Or a full meeting.
Great.
Okay.
Some just little logistical things we need to work.
No, I'm totally good with that. I'm just making a clarification
Yeah,
for
yeah.
the May meeting as we're getting all of our stuff together, because I think we have it on our draft agenda at the moment, so.
I know this ended up as a much bigger conversation than we had all intended, but if we're putting something like this out, I just want to make sure it's right and in a good package before we do it.
Yep.
All right, item number 12, discussion of possible action regarding posting photographs of licensed inspectors to the TREIC website. So I brought this up, and I'll give you a little brief synopsis why this even came up. And this is not something I'm hot and heavy about, but it's just a suggestion, something I was just wanting to roll around. I was asking staff, what are the possibilities of doing that? And it came up because I was given an inspection report by another inspector from a separate inspection. He sent me a report, said, hey, look at this report, I want you to take a look at it. And it was a bad report. Standards were not followed, form was not improper. I mean, it was just really bad. So I typically try to call the inspector first and give them an opportunity, hey, what happened, just happened that day, whatever it is. They didn't answer. I look on TREIC's website, look up the number, and the inspection was in Richardson, but the inspector's down in Houston. So, and it's a different number. So I call the number and the guy's like, I don't know what you're talking about. I never did that inspection last month. So there was an inspector in Richardson that was doing inspections under a license number and a name that was not his. From a guy that's, in Houston, so it's basically identity theft, unlicensed activity and identity theft and the whole kit caboodle and whatnot. So one of the things that I was throwing around as a result of that, there's a whole lot of that, but we don't need to get into, but one of the things in looking at that was, what's the possibility, if it's even a reasonable suggestion, or if it's just, not a big deal, or if it's logistically too much of a pain, to have the inspectors have the option to put their face up next to their license, just as a maybe a little extra line of, oh, yep, that's who I'm getting.
Like we do in the city, it's got a picture and their name.
Yeah, your local associations typically on their website give the opportunity to put your face on there. The Texas Realtors has the option, you can put your, face on there too, whatnot. People use it for marketing, whatnot. Not gonna get in the whole story about somebody using their glamour shot from 20 years ago as the picture up there. That's a whole different story, but at least.
Well, I think that's relevant, because if you're trying to talk about whether or not you recognize somebody on the website, relevancy of the picture matters.
Sure, absolutely.
But
So-
it brought up an idea. I've been going in people's
The
houses
recency of the picture.
for 24 years. I've never been carded. When I say, I'm your inspector, can I come in and root through your house? Nobody's ever said, really?
Just to give the consumer another way to, yeah, this is the guy that's in my house. I just, something I was thinking of, so I wanted to throw it out there, and, Tony, I think you had talked to staff about whether that was even possible, or.
Well, just, you would ask for some pros and cons. So
Okay.
We
Sure.
discussed some pros and cons.
Yeah, and I can walk through those. As usual, I'm the cons person, right?
That's all right.
So in looking at this, I think you would want to think about a couple of things. One, if this is a consumer protection issue, I think it would need to be a mandatory situation. So everyone's got to submit that photo. That'd be a statutory change, because we'd be collecting such information. We don't have that authority to collect that information and post to the website. I think Tony just raised it, and actually I think Lee raised it first, which is you'd want to think about, okay, how is it confirmed? Because as a regulatory agency, we're putting it out there, hey, this is your inspector. Sort of like it's been TREIC verified is what people tend to think when they see stuff on our website, which I hope is what they think when they look on our website, right? So what does that process look like? And then I think this is one, when I look at legislation that we're seeing out there, and I look at the different issues with identity theft and things like that, it seems to be that there's a push towards putting less on the websites, just for purposes of, there are folks who don't like having their image. There are folks who are in domestic violence situations, just all that kind of stuff. And we have ways to address that, but I think those are the considerations that we want to look at. And I think you may find quite a few people who are like, I object, I do not want my photo on the internet. I'm married to one, right? Like, I want no internet presence whatsoever, as it relates to pictures of me. So I think those are the thoughts. What's the enforcement of it? But if you do ultimately want to make such a recommendation to move forward with it, because, I agree, you guys have just talked about all these other reasons for it. Those are the ones that I would be talking to you about, that I'd bring up to the commission in a workshop of like, hey, here's the considerations, but if you want to put it on the list for consideration, that's what we're doing right now. It's going to workshop before, the commission would go back and forth on it. So that's.
Okay, I can see, to get our license, we have to do the background fingerprint and everything, but who knows that's the person going in the house?
You think
obviously,
that the consumer is gonna get on the TREIC website?
No, but
Check before you come in the house?
but they really have no method. They know, if they're savvy, they know, okay, Steve Reinhardt has a license, and I know he did a background and fingerprint check, but how do I know that's Steve that just came in my house?
Right, because
the
in that,
appliance guy that showed up to your house is the appliance guy, so.
in that
He's
particular,
got a license. But
No, appliance guy has a license?
Appliance installer has a license, electrical.
No, I should check his license.
Anybody that.
But is his picture on the website? That's right? That's. Cause you have a license, you have, I mean,
I guess other than a driver's license or a weapon license, there aren't any.
And I don't wanna take one one situation and make it like it's this huge issue for everybody across the board. So I don't wanna make it that, so I'm not real hot on heavy one way or the other. I just wanna throw that as a possibility as something that we think from a consumer side might be an extra layer of little protection, because
I
that's
think
kind
if
of.
you can do it optional, that's fine. I don't think mandating it, sorry.
Yeah, Bruce.
Sorry, Bruce, go ahead.
You're
You're
muted,
muted.
Bruce.
He's trying. You're still mute, there you go.
There you go.
Yeah, why can't you just show them your driver's license instead of requiring that? That'll show proof of who you are.
Sure. Absolutely, that's, if a seller, or a buyer wants to do that, they can absolutely do that too, sure.
Yeah.
I'm just looking, like in this scenario, if the buyer looks back and goes, man, this report looks kinda, is this guy licensed? They go on TREIC's website, look at license, yep, that's the guy's name, okay, he's licensed.
I think what you're saying, if we could just do it optional, where.
Well,
Otherwise, we do a.
but- and that's just
thing.
interesting.
I think optional,
Okay.
optional is problematic though, because then you
Yeah.
have some people who have it,
Yeah,
and
you're
some that
right,
don't,
you're right.
and that, does that elevate the
You're right.
people who do above the ones who
Well,
don't? who
I mean, I
choose it?
understand
and
what
consumer
you're trying to
protection is
say.
not optional, right?
Right.
So if we're
Yeah.
saying this is consumer protection, then it needs to be.
Well, I think
across
what
the
Lee,
board.
the way Lee brought it up wasn't necessary, because you were saying you would like to be able to match the inspector that was doing it.
I mean, I guess and I didn't think of it, as a regulatory agency, it's gotta be all or none.
Yeah.
Right.
As opposed to Texas Realtors, which is a trade association,
Yeah.
local associations, they can have the option.
Right. The idea of driver's license and tractor license.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There you go.
Now, my concern is how did he get a super key? That's kind of my other concern, but that's a whole different.
You pay the ransom. That's it.
Yeah. So,
Pay the ransom, you get it.
any other comments on that? I'm assuming no action here, it was just something for discussion.
We talked about it.
Okay, fair enough. All right. There we go, now I can get to this item. Item 13, discussion possible action regarding a definition of specialized tools and equipment. Yes, just kind of paste it out a little bit. All right, so this came up, I brought this up because it's in our current legal SOP course. And as you guys know, we're going through the renewal and everything else, or the renewal of that course, making some modifications and whatnot. In that, there was a list initially of what was considered a basic tool. And basic tool for rules purposes, basic tool versus specialized tool, or what you're required, what not required. So there was a list in there, and as one of the writers went through and was modifying the list, it kind of, truth be told, I didn't even realize the list was in that course, there. But I just felt as a writer in the writing group, I think that if we're gonna make a list of what is considered a basic tool, which is something in the SOP that an inspector can be held accountable for, that's something that we as a committee need to go through and probably start with SOP and come up through the full committee and whatnot. I think it's, from a prudency standpoint, I think it's more prudent for the SOP committee to really hammer that out and look at it before we put that in a course that is gonna go out to 5,000 inspectors and say, because now we have something coming from TREIC that says, this is a basic tool. If you don't use all of these, you might be held disciplinary
And I
action.
think it could be done because there are tasks that have to be performed.
Yeah.
That require something other than what we have in our physical body.
Well, I don't think the list needs to be in that course at all anyway, because it's a renewal course.
So this is, on 56 is what you're talking about, the list?
Yeah.
This right here?
Oh, in the book, yes.
In the book.
We had a few variations.
list written.
There are some recommendations, and then there was a basic list, because the definitions, the SOP has a definition of.
It talks about basic tool versus specialized equipment. So I think if we're gonna do that, why don't we lay that out and define it?
That's what's in the manual,
Okay.
like, right now.
So, yeah, there is a list there. But like I said, it's just, personally, I don't think that list should be in that course anyway, because that course is not for new inspectors. That course is for renewal. People that are already, or in theory, have already been doing inspections for at least 2 years. more than likely, they already have the basic tools sitting in their car right now.
Well, the renewal also says what form to use, and they should already know that. I think an appendix, just an appendix list is what.
And that's what this is.
Talked about, yeah.
And that's what this is. But I think if we're gonna come up with that list, I think that needs to start through
Yeah.
the right channels.
It's just like a ladder to get to the first floor.
Yeah.
And it is basic.
And we have time, because I would think this would be a non-substantive change on this appendix if we were to modify it or remove it, as opposed to kicking the whole course out for that. I don't think that would be.
It probably wouldn't take too long if you just read through every item in the SOP and what do I have to have something other than my hands?
Right.
And eyes and nose to do.
Right.
You know, so
I mean,
you have to be able to measure temperatures. Right, we've got a lot of options.
but I think if we're treating everybody that gets this license as a professional, they obviously have enough brain to be able to pass a test. I think instructing them, like, we don't tell plumbers what tools they have to carry. We don't tell pest control technicians, you gotta carry this pump can, or this, or this and that. I think coming up with the list could just go on and on. Yeah.
And there's gonna be a lot of difference in,
And how's
and I agree
how's
with you on
enforcement
some of
gonna
those too, so.
So the enforcement action comes up, well, they're gonna say, well, did you have a nut driver? Well, we don't define that as a nut driver. We define that as a screwdriver, so you're out of compliance with this list.
And that's kind of my concern too,
I
is
don't
if
think we
you
should
don't
do a
have
list.
every single
When we
thing.
went through the SOPs before, we said, we're not gonna do that, we're gonna leave it up to the educated licensed provider to come up with a tool that they need to comply with this SOP.
I've seen providers.
I'm sorry, I said call it back.
Back and everything.
No, thank you.
Yeah, you're right.
Go ahead.
So
Name.
Shannon Gatewood, is it rather than having an actual, you need a ladder that gets to, can you have a section that says, here's the requirements of the SOP? You need a tool to get you to the second.
And we have that.
You need a tool to check an outlet. You need a tool to, and not necessarily say, well, you need a receptacle test.
Yeah, and that's what we addressed it when we did the SOP revision, is we said, the inspector has to carry whatever to meet these standards.
Here's the pieces of the SOP that
Reasonable
say,
and appropriate.
Right.
yeah, that say you're going to need something to do the test.
Yeah,
But then on the other hand, you need to tell somebody who's been doing this for 2 years, 10 years, whatever, you need this tool.
That's kind of my other thing. If they're taking this course, they're already
right,
licensed.
yeah, they probably should come
Well,
out.
how many years did guys do inspections without something a tool to check 240 out? They never had one because they never even knew they had to do it, and they're licensed.
I've never had one until somebody got this.
Yeah. Mike?
I should say, we never specifically asked if you have a tool to do this.
Yeah, just.
We look at the standards of practice, and if they didn't meet the standards of practice,
Yeah,
that's what the requirements are, then that's how our discipline's based.
right.
So to me, it's two things. One, are we creating more of a problem by creating a list? And or should we just remove this from this particular course? Because like I said, I think this course for renewals, we're not targeting inspectors. Yeah.
So-
Right back to it.
So I think your point is well taken. The list was there in the previous course. It was a more reduced list. And I think the author at the time was trying to educate the inspectors of what were reasonable and appropriate tools, and actually mention the rule. But then as part of the revision, I think there was additional writing where there were additional tools mentioned. And you know, I had a concern defining what's a basic tool and what's a specialized tool, because I think that's what the list started to form. And there was a disagreement among the inspectors, that the writers, as to what was which. And it was a legitimate concern because everybody can have different opinions.
Yeah.
So that is problematic. And then Lee brought up the point like, well, you know, it seems like we don't have a good understanding of what a specialized tool is, because Steve was mentioning the electrical outlet, the testers. Is this a specialized tool or not? Well, we're gonna need a reasonable and appropriate tool to test anyways. So we have to use it, whether you consider it to be a basic tool or whether you consider it to be a specialized tool. It is still a reasonable and appropriate tool that's needed. So it is problematic to define the tools at this point. So I think, I see your concerns, and I agree that maybe we should, it could be a recommended tool, but I don't think we should start defining what is which.
Right.
But I think
I'm okay.
the inspectors need to understand what is reasonable and appropriate, and that's always a challenge. Now, you did suggest, I think it's on the agenda, whether this should be defined. And I mean, we're not opposed to that. I think any clarity would be helpful, being that this is an issue that's come up. So we're not opposed to that. But I think really that's the issue. Maybe we should stay away from defining the tools at this time.
And I'm perfectly okay with not defining it, especially like in the SOP, but I'm saying if we are gonna put this in there, I'm okay if we put most of this in and say, these are some suggestions.
Yeah,
and
it's
do
just the way you present
so
it.
that from an inspector standpoint, I don't wanna read this course and say, crap, TREIC's gonna come after me if I don't have
Yeah.
this, and this.
And like
Because now
Mike's
I'm doing
saying,
all the
that's not how we approach it. How we approach it, we look at whether they did or did not report a deficiency. That's the violation. There's no rule that says, if you don't use this tool, you're negligent. That's not how it works.
Yeah,
So,
I wanna make sure it's word there, cause like on this one, I have an issue with 3 of them, nut drivers, voltage continuity meter, and roof pitch.
and that's a personal opinion of the author, whoever the author, was it Tom?
Yeah.
So, again, that's different, different opinions. So maybe and that list wasn't anything that was agreed to. It was kind of, everybody was throwing out their ideas.
Yeah, and it's nothing on you in any way, shape, or form, because you took a list that was already there and tried to make it better. I completely understand that. For my nut drivers, I don't need a whole nut driver set and whatnot. I have a tool that gets to every panel size cover. I consider a nut driver. A roof pitch gauge, I can take a 12-inch ruler and another one and go 12 inches out, and how far down? There's my roof pitch.
Well, I use my phone. The point is they need something to determine if the material on the roof is correct or not. What's the easiest way to do that?
And then the voltage continuity meter, we don't,
$4.
we don't need to be testing voltage
I'm not
on
gonna get into a
circuits.
conversation with
Yeah.
you right now.
Yeah.
But I think what Lee brought up was just making sure the wording is correct in the course.
Suggestions, recommendations. I
So
want to
that
make sure the
doesn't
reader doesn't think
implement
TREIC's gonna hold me
like we have to
accountable.
hear.
I'm gonna have this.
Yeah, I think that's perfect.
Because what I got out of this is that, just from what all the inspectors were saying, is that everybody has different opinions of what kind of tools they can use.
Right.
And maybe one inspector, in their experience, found certain tools that were useful, and another inspector has gone a different direction. So I don't think it's bad to recommend, these are some tools that could be useful or reasonable and appropriate, but maybe stay away from, because the problem is this. The problem, the way it's written, it doesn't say you can't use it. It says you don't have to use a specialized tool. It doesn't say, you can't use it. So even if you consider the tester a specialized tool, it's still a reasonable and appropriate tool to use for testing the electrical outlets.
Good. Just a counterpoint to your choose for renewals. I know part of the discussion of apprentice licensing and stuff was also, is the legal ethics going to be required in a certain time frame of being licensed as an apprentice?
Absolutely.
So just.
That's a good point.
Yeah, definitely. But like the second paragraph in this appendix, the inspection requires the use of reasonable and appropriate tools to satisfy the requirements of the SOP. Below is a list of reasonable and appropriate tools.
Yeah.
That is basically saying, you have to have this, is what that paragraph says.
I think going with a recommendation is significantly better, but we can talk about that at the, right?
Well, I think.
I'm good if we leave it in, if we change how that's worded.
Well, we're thinking,
But I just,
address that.
I think we can open, like you talked about, Sean, I think we can open a whole different can of worms when we start specifying a list. So I want to make sure we have this
So it
conversation.
says you have to have reasonable, and then it says these are
reasonable.
Well,
Or no,
yeah.
suggested.
These are suggested, or
Tony, the recommended-
these are possible to, so that those two
Referring to
sentences are
the
not.
course of putting together.
I think the
Yeah,
one
here.
can-
Yeah.
I would say, you
I
could
think
say,
examples.
here's some
Yes.
examples
Yeah.
of reasonable,
Yes.
rather than, because you're right, the way that's worded does imply that you'd have to do it. But I think also, not to go a different route, I think it's worth noting and putting on the record again what Mike and Tony have said about how enforcement isn't, that's not how they're determining whether something is,
Right.
if the form's filled out properly, not how that determination is made. In other words, if they determined something was deficient or not, they're not saying, well, did you use a nut driver to do that?
Right, well, and if it comes to the legal thing, TREIC may not be looking for it, but a lawyer may be looking specifically for what's in those things. What course, you took the legal and ethics course, it says you're required to have these tools. Do you have these? I mean, it's trying to think all those things. So, and he and I may not agree with everything that's on the list, but if we change the verbiage, I'm good with leaving the list there if we change the verbiage so it does not appear in any shape or form that it's required.
I can change that verbiage.
Can do that.
Yeah.
And we have a meeting right after this, but instead of just throwing that, I want to make sure, I want to get the whole committee's perspective on whether we actually need a list or not, or if we don't. So I'm hearing that we don't, and this is good as long as we change our verbiage. Pretty good?
Yes.
Okay, cool. Number 14, discussion of possible action regarding 22 TAC 535.216 renewal of license.
Okay. Exciting, we're at the rules portion, everybody.
Dun, dun, dun.
Let's do it. Okay, 216, so I'm gonna take you back in time. I wanna say it was maybe the July meeting where we originally discussed this, or maybe it was October. But Abby gave a little bit of a presentation on the expire process and that idea that somebody had a certain window where so long as they certified that they were okay, there would be no unlicensed activity, and there's a similar component to inspectors, and we talked about the commission as a whole wanted staff to examine that, and so we've examined that as it relates to sales agents, brokers, and inspectors. And so we put forth rules, there's a little bit of a holdup administratively, but we ended up proposing rules at the February meeting tied to this. And they're out for proposal right now, so we're receiving public comment on them. One comment that we received, which is actually from a staff member, was a question on some of the language in 216 as it related to, so it's a late renewal, so when you late renew, you're gonna be set to inactive. And so there was some language about the insurance requirements. So we have cleaned this language up. So what's out for proposal right now looks like this. What we're going to do is we're going to strike through and make this reference to 211. So you'll be late renewed by paying a fee under 210, and then you're set to inactive. This is for the late renewals. So in order to go active, you'll need to meet the requirements of 211, which are the insurance requirements, and reactivation itself is covered by section 215. This is not, I'm being like super technical, this is not a substantive change. We're just making sure that we've got everything covered in terms of what we're referencing and making sure that the insurance requirements are still found in this new version.
So, something caught my ear when you said, so say I renew, I expire at the end of November, which I do.
Okay.
I mean, on November every other year. My insurance goes until next year, so I'm good there. I've paid, I've done everything else, but I'm missing a couple CEUs. I hit 1 December, my license is expired. Now, I'm within a window where I can renew without penalties, but I'm still expired. I can't do any inspections. Correct?
Right.
Because you said I thought you said something about there's no unlicensed activity. There could be if somebody thinks they're,
Sorry, I think I misspoke. What I mean is it would be unlicensed activity.
it would be
Yes,
unlicensed.
I'm sorry,
So 1
I,
December.
Right.
And until there is acknowledgement that, okay, my CEU's got in, and basically for me, I see on the website, new renewal date. I am unlicensed, but there is a period where I can do that renewal without having, penalties. But so if I paid my money and everything, but my CEUs didn't make it there until like the 30th of November, not that anybody would be good. So, come 1 December, they haven't been accounted for, my license is gone. What happens there as far as penalties on renewal?
I think that's a different question, right?
Okay.
That's at processing time, and then there's the deferral fee. I'm gonna let the queen of licensing.
But there's a few
walk
reasons
through
your
this.
license would lapse. One might be CEUs, one might be I haven't gone on and paid my fees, one might be insurance. But they all result in the license lapsing. And I guess there's different reasons that you might be paying, a penalty for renewal.
Right, the late renewal fee, any number of reasons, and whether you just totally forgot to submit it, or you submitted it and you don't have any CE completed and you're trying to renew active. The commission initiative last year that created the original proposed change was to close a loophole that existed or exists in the rules today for those who are sponsored, where they can late renew and their sponsor, whether that's a sales agent sponsored by a broker or a real estate inspector sponsored by a professional inspector, that sponsor can go back and say, I know this person renewed 4 months late, however, I'm checking that I was supervising that person the whole time. And so it's a retroactive, active renewal. We had different terms for it. We called it the vouching rule, the slider rule, where, the enforcement division wouldn't take action because that sponsor at any time could come back and say, no, this person was being supervised by me that whole time they were expired, to, a period of up to 6 months. So to close that loophole, these changes were made. That was at the direction of this committee and the commission. So similar language changing for real estate license holders. And I think, and Vanessa, chime in at any time.
Yeah.
This is just additional cleanup, because it is so complicated when you're thinking about all the different scenarios. This was a cleanup of this one item, that if the new process will be that on December 1st, right, the scenario you gave was November 30th. So on December 1st, let's say we're setting you to expired, we're now also setting every license to inactive and terminating any relationship. So now at this point, you are expired, you cannot perform any work that the license allows you to perform. When you late renew, you will only be able to renew inactive. Now you'll need to meet the requirements in these other sections of rules that are cited to go back to active. So that's completing CE, providing proof of insurance, and if you're a real estate or an apprentice inspector, getting a sponsor.
The loophole's there, we're closing loophole, because if the loophole's there, they will use it.
Right.
And like we saw where the sponsoring inspector expired and the real estate inspector being sponsored was still doing inspections.
Right.
I was like, okay.
So the change, it's very simple to say. What we're gonna do is set everyone to inactive when we expire them. So in terms of the rule language, that's what this additional cleanup is
So
addressing.
1 December, if I looked at my status, it would say inactive automatically. Expired
and inactive.
But
and inactive.
what about that CE deferral?
Well, that's
But
only
that
for
doesn't apply.
brokers and agents.
Okay, that's
Yeah.
where I'm getting it. Okay.
So the 1 December, mine would say expired.
Expired, inactive.
So it's a both.
It'd say both. In the back end terms, it's a primary status and a secondary status.
What did-
Primary
what does it say
status
now?
expired. I think it will preserve the active status. I'm not entirely sure without trying to find someone who's expired and looking them up. But,
So it'd be 6 months before it went from expired to inactive to just expired?
well, expired is the superseding.
Right, I've just never seen it say expired and inactive, I've only ever seen it say
I
expired.
might be
or
mistaken, I'm
inactive.
thinking of the back end, so I'm
Okay.
not sure what it looks like on the website, I'm not
Okay, I just-
confirmed that that's what it says, but your status would be expired.
Okay.
The loophole closing is that your only option, or the only status we're gonna give you once you renew is current. When you're renewing, like, it's current, you'll now have an expiration date 2 years in the future, but you will be inactive. And now you'll need to complete CE, provide proof of insurance, and/or proof of sponsorship in order to be activated.
Those are the requirements, what she's just saying, those requirements for reactivation, the ones tied to insurance and the reactivation process in general. We're just cleaning up what that looks like and what's out for proposal. So it's not a change to what's happening, we're just making it,
Clarifying.
yeah.
And say you renew a month later, it doesn't move your next renewal. You're 23 months left on your license once you go back instead of 24. You keep the same birthday.
Same renewal date.
Same renewal date, as long as you're late renewing within that 6-month window. Once that 6-month window closes, now you're looking at a reinstatement or a whole new license
Different ball of
application. Then you will get a new expiration date.
And there is a plan with this to communicate, right? Like this is not rolling out until October 1st. We want to go ahead and get everything adopted so that we can start communicating this. And, you know, Denise has got like a whole system of how she's gonna inform the folks, I think in June, who get their renewal notices 90 days in advance. So we will communicate this really everywhere, but I wanted to bring this to your attention just because it's out for proposal. We are making this is a change that we're making on it. And, you
So
know.
we don't need to have a motion to propose.
So you can
That's right.
recommend it, yeah.
Okay,
You can,
any other questions on it?
Now it says what we wanted.
Right.
yes, right.
So I would entertain a motion to recommend the proposal to the full commission.
I recommend to forward as presented.
Motion made by Steve. Second by Sean. Any other discussion on this item? Hands up. Okay, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say no. Motion is passed unanimously. Number 15, discussion of possible action regarding 22 TAC 5.535.222 inspection reports.
So this is out for proposal?
And this is just the verbiage change, just kind of changing where it's at and whatnot. So one of the other things I just wanted to bring up, and again, I don't want to beat a dead horse on this. I really don't. I want to make this a long conversation, but it did get brought up in the last commissioners meeting about inspections being paid at closing. I have my own concerns, which I expressed before, about consumer issues on that. One of the other concerns that we hadn't talked about that I kind of wanted to bring up, and I don't know if there's anything we can do here, other than maybe do a communications piece or something of that nature, is there are still some areas where it is a common practice for brokers and or agents to state that, you know, we will not recommend you for inspection services if you do not accept payments at closing and whatnot. And I think that's a real burden to those license holders in those areas. And I'm just, other than the other issues that we've already kind of dealt with and hammered out on this particular issue, I just kind of wanted to bring that up for discussion, see if we have any thoughts or if there's anything we can do from TREIC side on that.
Must be regional.
It is regional.
I've never experienced it.
It is regional. I've been asked maybe once, so it doesn't happen in my area a lot, but there are areas, at least one that I know of, if not two, actually there is two, where that is a common practice, where they can say, well, if you, as an inspector, if you don't take payment at closing, you will never get a referral from anybody in our office in any way, shape, or form. It's like they're kind of being blackballed, and that's a problem. Good quality people not able to do good quality work for something that isn't a requirement. So, just kind of curious, throwing it out there.
You can't do that.
Yeah, I know. So, okay.
I don't know
I don't know if we can do anything from that side on TREIC, rather than, I don't know.
I don't think there's
Other
anything we
than
could do.
not ethical.
Yeah, maybe fall under an ethical issue. I don't know. Okay. So entertain a motion
Well,
to,
you've got 3 comments.
oh, sorry.
It's on the next.
Oh, there it is. One, there is no explanation what the amendment says about receiving payment before the inspection. That is not explained at all. Actually, it is explained, actually.
That's what the change is.
Made by our slow roll payment, but expect report realtor included, so I may suggest 72 hours or 72 hours, whichever comes last. We had it at 72 hours, it actually got modified to 48 when we added the stipulation, paid in full. That was one of the issues we did. My understanding, inspectors have 3 days to deliver reports, irrelevant of when they get paid, keep it that way. Well, okay, somebody, that person probably just didn't know the rule had changed,
They're
so
using a 7.1.
they're using a 7.1.
Can I just, because I'll have to do the preamble on Robert Powers, can you just say that one more time?
Yeah, many buyers slow roll payment, but expect report, realtor included. So may I suggest 72 hours after completion of inspection or 72 hours after payment has been made, whichever comes last.
And you do not want to.
Okay.
So, question I have about the way this is worded, that we talk about 72 hours, 48 hours. Here it says 2 days. So if I do an inspection Monday morning, does that mean I have till midnight Wednesday or 48 hours? 2 days is not real clear. I would think 48 hours is more clear.
How do you?
Well, we use like business days. Just if we start I think if we start putting hours in there, that's gonna like cause a huge wave of issues with every form that we have.
So if I do inspection anytime
It's
Monday.
not, it's calendar.
Calendar.
Or
But he wants,
inspection
he's
report.
talking about if you do it at 6 o'clock.
No,
You have to
because
do it at
then,
6
then it would
o'clock.
be doing it like
Days.
1 AM
Yeah.
and stuff like that. We usually kind of, the next day we would day 1 and the second day would be day 2.
So if I do it anytime Monday, as long as I get it to them by
Wednesday.
Wednesday night,
Yeah,
good.
Yeah.
Wednesday 11:59.
Okay.
And it is calendar days.
Mhm.
Right.
Just to- okay.
Yes.
And I found out the day you do it doesn't count.
Yes,
The day you do it is day 0.
Day zero.
yes.
That's how it's looked at on the contract side. It's day 0, so it's consistent across the board.
Now, and I've run into a scenario where I go do the inspection, the water's not on. They don't get it on until the next day. And we talked about, does that mean the inspection's not complete till the next day? The interpretation we talked about was, that's kind of true. I guess there's 2 options of completing the inspection report with, say, no water service, or like I do, I tell them, you got the option, I can give you the report the way it is now in 2 days, or we can wait till you get the utilities on. I finish the inspection, the 2 days starts there.
I've always looked at it as, if I get out there and there's no water, I'm calling the client immediately. Do you want me to continue and do it without the water, or do you want me to, we want to reschedule? How do you want to do it? They say, I want you to continue, that's a full report. And if I come back and do the water, that's a different report. It's a supplemental report.
But
It's a living report
re-inspection.
just on the water system.
Yeah.
So re-inspection.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
But that full report, the day I do it, even if there's things I couldn't do, that's the full report day. I give them the full report, and it's in there, no water is on, and it's in all the subsequent plumbing sections. Yeah. Okay. All right,
But they need to write it that way.
absolutely,
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. All right,
If you get that huge house and mansion, it takes you 2 days to inspect it, when you finish the second day.
yeah, as long as it's agreed to,
Upon
and
completion of the.
right, and that's, and more than likely, that's gonna be agreed to in writing prior to the inspection.
Yeah, I just wanted to stress that point. I mean, you can't put in rule every single example. So that's why unless otherwise
agreed to.
in writing, because there's gotta be some emphasis on the inspector to determine in a situation if they need to do something else, to talk to their client and say, okay, this is what I need to do. Are you okay with this?
The part that caught me was in writing, because usually I verbally say, I'll come back and finish it tomorrow because it's getting dark. I gotta give it to them in writing.
What the rule says.
Text message, email,
There you go.
you know, that's in writing. I mean, that can be used as, you know,
Have the
documentation.
conversation and then as we talked about.
Yeah.
On site in the text message.
That's what I would normally do as a good business practice, just reiterate, hey, per our conversation, here's what we do, but at least then it's writing, some issue. So, all right, any other conversation on that item? So, we need a motion to recommend proposal,
Yep.
correct?
Approval, right?
You're gonna recommend for adoption.
Adoption.
For adoption, okay. So, I'd entertain a motion to recommend for adoption to the full commission.
We adopt this rule as written.
Motion made by Mike, second. Sean, any other discussion on this item? No hands up there. All in favor signify by saying aye. Any opposed, saying no. Motion passes unanimously. Item number 16, discussion of possible action regarding 22 TAC Chapter 535 quadrennial review as follows.
Yes, this is also exciting stuff. So also way back when, I think this truly was in August, Abby went through and highlighted some some of the quadrennial rule review changes to the inspector rules. And so those went for proposal in May. This is not included in your materials because it's like hundreds of pages.
Yeah.
But I'm gonna highlight the, just the changes as it relates to the inspector rules, and this will not take long. So the changes on 208 are non-substantive. We're just striking things, clarifying, changing, title and chapter. If you look at the change to 209 on the next page, the big change there is we've eliminated language that was tied to the education rule changes. So we're cleaning up all, for a while we had the rules both going in place and different references everywhere. We've cleaned that up because that time period is expired. Yeah, so it's gonna look a lot better and easier to read. So there's that. The fee changes on the next one are non-substantive. So in the changes to 212, similar to what I just said, we've eliminated language that was tied to those, the requirements that interchange between the two. 213 looks interesting, and I went over this. So we have started doing this with our rules is we're incorporating forms or by reference. And so all of this information still exists. It's just on the form. So that way the rule isn't so hard to read. So I think it's really going to streamline the process. But those, just to be very clear, it didn't go away. It just went somewhere else. It's been on that form. So then let's see, what are we on next? That's 218, right, is next. So that adds language clarifying when an instructor can receive credit. So within that license period, that's the big change there.
Changed all the form numbers and
Yep.
that type of stuff.
Yep, yeah, and then a bunch of other, and then 219, 220, and 224 are all non-substantive changes, as you can see, just all the references. So I wanted to cover those with you, and we do have this as an action item because these are your rules and we want you to know. I mean, you've seen them before, but they're out for proposal. Here they are for adoption. We haven't got any comment on them. So you guys would vote to recommend for adoption if you love them.
Any questions on those? I would entertain a motion for recommendation for adoption to the commission. Second, Sean, seconded by Steve. Any other discussion on this agenda item? All in favor signify by saying aye. Any opposed say no. Motion carries unanimously. Number 17, update regarding legislative session.
So, thank you, Lee. I'm gonna do that. Really, the only item I want to talk about, I'm happy to talk about other things, but the one of interest to this committee is the bill to repeal the Inspector Recovery Fund. We've had movement on the House bill. It's been through committee. The House unanimously voted to move it on, and it's been received in the Senate. The Senate version has not had a hearing yet, but I have been in conversations with the office. Not sure if they're waiting for the House bill to come over, because the Senate bill is slightly different, so they would need to either have a substitute or just take up the House bill and pass it out. So that may be what they're waiting on. But as of right now, there's no reason to think this bill won't move forward. I will obviously update you guys if I find out something other than that. But as of right now, it looks good. So, and so again, I'm happy to talk about anything else. We've got a couple other bills, but I don't think there's any real interest to what it's you guys.
Any questions for Tony on legislative items? Let's see, I think we're good. Item number 18, request for future meeting agenda items. So a couple things wanted for SOP that was asked of me. and I think it's probably best if it goes through SOP first before it comes here, by Tom is, wanted to ask SOP if while looking at standards, if you can look at appliance, gas line connectors, and shutoff valves, whether they should be considered part of the gas distribution system or on the appliance, whatnot. Similar question with electrical disconnects.
I
So
think the gas is defined.
I,
It's defined up to the shut-off.
he's got good questions on it, so I just,
Okay.
it's somewhat, I was kind of looking at the same thing, but he brings up some very valid points, and I think it's at least worth the discussion.
Do you don't have that? Or?
That was the only thing I had for SOP. Education's obviously still gonna be working on the course.
But we're gonna need to, we're gonna need to have the evaluation form.
And evaluation form,
Lee,
absolutely
is
correct.
this something we discussed that it was in the wrong section?
Yes.
The one that came out? Okay.
Yes.
What was?
Oh,
The,
I know what you're
the appliance connectors?
Yeah,
You know,
appliance connectors.
When we did years ago, we had a separate gas section, and about 10, 12 years ago,
Got rid of it, and now
and
we're back.
combined it, and then when we separated it, it was not separated completely.
Yeah, so we just wanna make sure that that's,
It needs to be separated.
Sure.
Yeah, the weeds, not all the weeds got separated
Right.
from the grass.
we just wanna make sure they're defined properly. Not a huge one, but.
There is some confusion if you didn't understand the differences.
Well, they have to report it. When they have to report it, they're gonna be wondering, do we report it in this section or this section? I think that's where the confusion
I think
arises.
in what enforcement has always said, you might put it in the wrong section, but it's in the.
As long as it's there, yeah.
That's normally true. I think on this one, because of the issue, we probably wouldn't do anything,
Yes.
because it would be appropriate. But
we
as
should
clarification,
clarify.
I mean, I
We
think it's
should
good.
fix it.
1 second. Tony, did you have something?
Shannon gave it again. I think some of that goes back to the actual 7-6, because it says gas distribution systems and gas appliances in the plumbing section. So if we could just get rid of the appliance part.
Yeah.
Obviously, gas appliances.
I don't know where-
I'd really hate to do another form just for that.
I think that's where a lot of the confusion comes in though, because, well, it says gas appliances in the plumbing section. So,
Fair enough, I can see that. Like I said, it's definitely worth a discussion.
That's what they're. I agree. I got left on it.
Well, it's worth a
It's
discussion.
true, it's true. It should just say gas distribution. That's, I never before gets upgraded to say.
Yeah.
Yeah, I certainly don't want to go through a form change
Not
just
just for that.
for that, so,
Yeah,
but
the
it's a
SOP
it's a
itself
valid
could be defined.
Right.
Defined.
we can clarify that better.
Oh,
Sure, yes.
I forgot to ask a really important question that I promised I would ask.
Sure.
Is it okay, if Sierra, takes a picture during this meeting, which I think she already has, to use in, our recap?
We just sent no pictures.
Is everybody
Just sent
cool?
no
Yeah, I know, the contrary to what we just said.
John Walsh, America's Most Wanted, finally found me.
Now we're all over Facebook. Anybody wanna get?
So if anybody strongly objects to that, let us know.
Blur it out. I want to say something more.
I don't remember sending a picture release for the track, I don't remember that.
Marketing for.
In your 13 years, you used to go into watch. All right, so nobody has a problem with the picture, I'm assuming?
That would not be it.
All right.
It's like post office. I'm not on the lam anymore.
Yeah.
We'll try to get the most flattering angles.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, that's a challenge. Good luck. All right, any other future agenda items that anybody has, suggestions for? No? Okay. Discussion, possible action regarding future meeting dates. We're looking at the next two. So proposed possibilities are July 17th, October 16th. Does anybody have any questions, concerns, or conflicts with those two dates?
On my computer, it says last two. I'm just saying that. Last two.
Unless we change,
I wrote it in.
unless we change the rules, dude. All right, so let's start with July 17th. Everybody okay with July 17th, or are there anybody has problems with those? I see some nodding heads. So I see Dave was okay. Bruce, are you okay with July 17th? It's good. Everybody else okay? All right, July 17th. Set that one. October 16th. Could we possibly do the 18th? Because I have 2 other meetings on the 16th. Could we do Wednesday, the 18th? Or the other proposed was the 19th. Does either one of those 2 work better for anybody? I have board meetings I have to be to on the 16th, so I'm kind of stuck there.
I might seriously be like the airplane to Hawaii on 17th. Pest control conference is there.
Oh, pest control conference. Yeah.
That's important.
Education is important, right? 19th would be better.
You know what, I'll make it work. I can make the 16th work. Does anybody have any scheduling issues with the 16th? Let's just start there. If I'm the only one, then I can make it work.
You sure?
Yeah, I make it work.
October.
I do. I think
July?
yeah.
October, or October, right?
Yeah, October 16th. All right, so we'll leave it at October 16th. I'll put that in.
October what, 16?
16th. All right, those are those 2 dates. All right. Item number 20, anybody entertain motion to adjourn?
That's good.
There you go. Motion and seconded. We are adjourned at 12:06 PM. Thank you guys for joining remotely. Really appreciate it. Thank everybody here for helping. We do have a legal SOP writing course meeting after this for anybody that sit in and listen if you have nothing better to do.